Hey, Lauren, you are back in New York. I thought you were going to be live streaming from somewhere else for a change, but you are in your office. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm at headquarters here at Upright Analytics Central back in New York. I was in Denver this week.
My hometown, I know.
Do not, your hometown. I do not take vacation ever. So, going away for 3 days is always a big deal. But it was good to get out and good to be back. And, it's good to be back and see all this drama going on with Reddit. The
Did you?
CEO of Reddit is referring to protesting users as the landed gentry, which is very interesting. I am enjoying where social media is right now with Twitter, with Reddit. All of this is leading up to the election next year, the US presidential election. As we've seen in the last two election cycles in the US, presidential election cycles, 2016, 2020, right? Like there is a ton of social media manipulation, a lot of, things going on with what content gets spread and how it's moderated, different sides playing the algorithm. So watching all this play out, a year in advance is interesting, and we'll see where it goes. I'm excited. I think it's all funny.
Well, I mean,
I have to look at it as a joke. So
among the things happening, obviously, is there's new and different risks for the spread of misinformation, right? With potentially fake everything. It's wild. I think the general public, and we've talked about this before, like everything with the rise in AI, the general public is in no way prepared for it, because even us tech bros aren't prepared to grapple with it fully. And I think, that for most of us in the tech world, the election is not yet top of mind. So I appreciate, even for me as the journalist in the room right now, I appreciate the reminder that we've got to start thinking about that. And there's risks, there's a crazy side. And as much as I kind of deplore the demise of Twitter, I can also say I'm enjoying the disruption to all of it. I participated in the Reddit blackout for 48 hours and then promptly got back on there. Did you participate in the blackout or sit out Reddit or whatever?
I don't know. I was on vacation, so I wasn't really on Reddit. So I guess I was part of the blackout just because. But
by default, yeah.
Yeah, whatever. It's all nonsense.
Yeah,
it's hysterical. I think the whole thing's funny. It's all about the election and tinfoil hat, right? Like that's what these social media platforms are all about, the election. And with Twitter, Blue Sky is coming up as a competitor. That was Jack Dorsey's Blue Sky. So the person who was originally leading Twitter now has a different platform. Some people have moved over there. I think it's kind of on ice. But if Twitter goes more right wing, maybe there's room for a left wing platform. And Blue Sky, they've already got blue in there. That becomes the Democratic platform, and the two might split. So we'll see. This is all hypothetical.
Blue Sky is becoming what Mastodon was going to be as a potential replacement to Twitter. So yeah, probably in 6 months. I mean, I'm on there now, thanks to your friends who got me an invite, but I'm not using it. I just have platform overload, like most of us. And to segue into our guest, like most of us, I spend a lot of time here on LinkedIn because for data people, it is a good place to hang out and learn. And the guest we have today, Aaron Wilkerson, does data at Carhartt, a big company. So let's go ahead and bring him on. Get his take on Aaron. We didn't tell you we were going to ask you about anything social media, but let's start with that. What's your take on that, or are you more of a just LinkedIn person?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I used to be when Facebook first came out, I was still in college. So I remember Facebook back when you had to have an actual college email address to get on there. So I was a huge Facebook user, I don't know, for 16 years, but you guys talk about the election. So that was part of the reason. So I got off Facebook like September 2020, right before the election. So I've kind of pulled back away from kind of social media. So I'm mainly on LinkedIn. So I don't have Instagram or Twitter. Really just primarily LinkedIn. I do check. You got to my Reddit. I do check Reddit here and there. Like if I'm Googling stuff, like some Reddit forums come up. So I do peruse Reddit a little bit, but I would say primarily LinkedIn at this point. It's way more less confrontational and kind of just
One of the like beautiful things that's happened in the few years is like the fact that people aren't on Facebook anymore. Obviously, certain populations are, but I wouldn't have predicted the shift away from Facebook. And I'm that same generation where it was like, you know, I will admit I was a Facebooker, but yeah, it's people are.
I've talked to a lot of folks that I used to engage with on Facebook that they're like, yeah, I'm not on there anymore. So yeah, there's a lot of people who kind of were on there, but kind of have pulled away from it. So it is interesting. Just, you know, it's still, you know, that was 2004, so 19 years. So it's kind of coming of age. You know, this social media landscape.
Yeah. So tell us about yourself. So you tell us what your title is at Carhartt, and kind of what you do there.
Yeah, so at Carhartt, I'm the senior manager of data strategy and governance. Been with the company for 9 months now, so still relatively new in my first year. So in charge of a lot of the data governance, master data initiatives, in particular around product data, because you know, master data has tons of different domains with customers, employees, vendors. So we're primarily focused on product master data since we're a product company, and then we sell a lot of our merchandise through our digital channels to wholesalers and direct to consumers. So yeah, mainly working with data on the governance side with people, process, technology, and also data as the main pillars of what I do day to day.
And just for people who don't know much about Carhartt, I knew it as like a well-known fashion brand. I didn't know much beyond that until last night when I read the Wikipedia page. So what is Carhartt?
Yeah, so Carhartt, it's a pretty old company. So it was founded in 1889 by our founder Hamilton Carhartt. So it's still a private family-owned company. I believe it's currently the great grandson of our founder, who's our current CEO. So still, family-owned. So it's based out of Dearborn, Michigan. So right outside of Detroit. Just I think southwest of Detroit is Dearborn. So a lot of people don't know that actually Carhartt is a local Southeast Michigan based company. So we kind of known for the fashion, apparel, and retail. A lot of people know that the Duck Brown Carhartt jackets, very much kind of came out of the rugged wear. That was part of our motto is we exist to serve and protect hardworking people. So a lot of people do plumbers, construction workers, line workers, oil and gas. Definitely a pretty tried and true brand as relates to kind of making durable fabric and durable materials and workwear. It kind of now we're I'm going to different product lines and things like that. So we've seen some more stuff in lighter fabrics and wear. So definitely trying to expand out the customer base and things like that. But, a lot of people do know us for kind of that rugged workwear. I talked to a lot of people since I was, it's those things where you start working for a company, but you don't really notice you work there. You see more people wearing it. So like I said, I went out to Vegas and LA back in April and just amazing just seeing all the people out there wearing Carhartt that you would have noticed that until you worked there. Like, oh, like all these people wear Carhartt. I was at a conference. Well, also we have a European stronghold as well. So a lot of people I know from Europe, yeah, we wear Carhartt as well. So it's a pretty cool company just because it's very much grown as a brand in the past, a couple of decades. I mean, a lot of people see some of our stuff on like Yellowstone. There's all these different TV shows that you'll see Carhartt stuff. The celebrities I've seen wear our products too. So it's a pretty fun brand to work for just because like pop culture wise, like it's relevant. Like even my kids were like, oh, I know what Carhartt is, and they kind of got some cool points with the kids for being able to bring home some Carhartt swag.
That's cool because I live in LA where like parents are like Hollywood actors and stuff, and even those kids, they do not think their parents are cool. So to have any compliment from your child about where you work is huge. I love it. Awesome. Are
So
you? Do you
no,
own-
I do. I have a good sweatshirt or two, like hoodies. I used to have one of the brown Carhartt jackets as well. So, very familiar with the brand. Yeah. Well, I'm curious. Data governance, master data. When you talk about that, you said you've been there 9 months. That to me says, there was a problem, and they had to bring in an expert to clean it up. What is data governance like starting, 9 months? Like, you probably, when you interviewed for the job and, we're talking to people before you accepted, what's the 30-day plan? What's the 6-month plan? What's the year plan? Like, what did you kind of walk into, and what have you accomplished in that 9 months in data governance? And how do you figure out the wins? Like, how does it kind of all work for some of our viewers who may have never worked in an organization that has invested in, master data and data governance?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to kind of other companies I've been at where, there's always just opportunity. Usually I've seen it where kind of similar to now where you kind of show up and they give you, a list of like, hey, here's all the symptoms of like different issues where we can't do this, or this may not be working, or this is not optimal. So my role is to kind of, pretty much start pretty quickly and start to talk to people and really understand the root problem. Because typically what you'll get is like symptoms of a problem, but you have to figure out what the problem is itself, and then actually creating the strategy to say, okay, for example, we're having issues maybe with issuing POs on time, or we're having some delays in creating like materials. So we're a pretty heavy SAP shop. So like either is our ability to set up materials to create POs, or we have orders come in where people can't place orders. So those are kind of those, symptoms that I typically come in and say, okay, here's all the different challenges that people are facing. So then it's really just digging into problem solving, right? So it's okay, taking all those things and trying to prioritize, right? Because, a lot of people are going to come to you with, here's all our main challenges we have, but you have to kind of prioritize that because all challenges aren't equal. So it's trying to figure out, okay, what are those high value that kind of causes the most pain, or, impacts revenue, impacts sales, impacts our go-to-market processes. So that's part of it, is trying to prioritize it. And then it's kind of, really it's kind of talking with people, right? So it's very full contact, like, okay, let me understand your processes. We brought in a consultant to help us really do a lot of process mapping, just because you need to figure out, okay, if this is the problem we're having, can we walk back to the process to figure out what's broken? So like very bare bones kind of process mapping to say, okay, here's the 20 steps to the process. What are the bottlenecks? What are our constraints? It kind of goes back to the very basic, people, process, and technology. So I always mention that just because I found that it's usually one of those where we have non-optimal technology, or we don't have the right people in place, or too many people in place, or the process has just way too many steps, and that's why it takes so long. So I'll say that's kind of similar to what I've been working on the past couple months, is trying to really put together the strategy, right? So the question is, okay, we have budget, we have funding, but what are we going to tackle? So that's my job, is saying, okay, given what we know and the challenges, here's the strategy of, here's the problems, here's how we're going to solve them, and here's the roadmap. So that's kind of a lot of what I've been doing the past time. I mean, there are some quick wins. So parallel, tangential to that, like there's those immediate things where, hey, if we just do this quick thing, we can get some quick wins. But I would say there's only so much quick wins, because some stuff is just really overhauling, where we really need to overhaul the process, or do a lot of change management. But you do look for those quick wins just to get some momentum and build trust in your stakeholders.
I've done some data governance, and one of the first things that surprised me is, like, obviously you talk to all these stakeholders, and to a certain degree do a company-wide audit, or I found that there was like a real thirst for data governance from all stakeholders. I think maybe because there's an awareness that all this is moving so fast, from especially a regulatory compliance perspective. For individual stakeholders, obviously this is not their specialty, and where I was expecting sort of pushback, on the contrary, I found that people were like tell me what to do. I want some top-down leadership here. Do you find that
Yeah,
reaction?
absolutely. Because I was giving a talk. I was at DGIQ in San Diego last week, and I was giving a talk about that, just kind of data governance and value. And someone asked a question afterwards. They say, what if people in the audience don't want to what if people you're in the business like don't want to talk to you, don't want to help, or not interested? What I said was, I've not found that problem. I found that if people have challenges or problems they're facing, like they want someone to show up and say, I can help you with that. I can solve your problem. So I think to your point, I think if you identify the folks that are having challenges, I've never heard someone say like, no, I don't want you to help me. It's like, yes, please come help me, because either like the thing I'm doing is not part of my job, or it takes me way too much time to do it. Like, it's really just, how do you kind of bring value? And value could be monetary value. It could be efficiency. It could be time savings. But I would say that identifying the stakeholders and identifying their actual problems. And because sometimes I've seen data governance where we try to show up with these solutions or these these policies or procedures, but we don't know, like we haven't communicated why we're doing that. So we're just showing up with these different standards, but no one wants more work, and we're giving people more work. So I would say making sure that what we're doing on the governance side really has value and really is solving a problem, I think it goes a long way to kind of building trust and maintaining those relationships with the business.
And what is the business value, if that's the difficult thing? Like, say, especially at a time when people are getting laid off, like how do you justify data governance? Because the reality is, like the regulatory fees, like it's only the big, the Amazons and the Facebook getting slapped with, GDPR style violations. So what's the real the real justification from a business value of data governance?
So I would say that's the trick, and that's the hard work. And like I said, that was one part of my talk, is that, it's really, you have to kind of track back those problems to some type of value to the business. So for example, like, if we have sales orders issues because we didn't set up data or product data correctly, there's typically a dollar sign to that, where this sales order could have been, $100,000 that was held up. Like that, those are those real hard dollar signs that matter to the business. Or, because we have data issues, we have to hire a separate contractor just to focus on like data quality, data cleansing. Like that's another dollar sign that, hey, this problem on the process side costs us, $20,000 a year in contractors. Or, technology side, because maybe we need to bring in a separate vendor to support a tool that's inefficient. That's $100,000. So I think it's really trying to track the challenges back to a dollar sign. Which can be tricky, but I would say it's there. It's just that we have to kind of take the initiative to look for it and kind of talk with our either business stakeholders or our customers. But I would say it's really trying to track those, because in the data governance, trying to solve problems, really is tracking those problems back to some type of, it could be monetary, it could be cost, it could be revenue. But I would say there's something is there. Just we have to kind of take the effort to find what is the cost or what is the impact on the business because of these problems that we're trying to fix with governance.
Absolutely, yeah.
How do you get technical teams bought into this? And I asked that with an ulterior motive, because I did one of these projects and led it a lot earlier in my career when I was working for a consulting firm, and for just a number of reasons, I consider that project to be somewhat of a failure, although my firm, billed out for it and got paid, so maybe they wouldn't. But, I had a difficult time getting actual change to occur. And so we could identify the problems. We could identify the business process changed in a supply chain management system. The code that was literally it was literally to put it in a simple terms, like relational databases, like there weren't like actual columns that described new processes that came up. And so the data was in a source system, but it wasn't being tracked anywhere else. And to change it, we would have had to go ahead and, have this technical team, write new code and build, get stuff scoped into their process and do software development life cycle, etc. Get this built. What what are the challenges that you face in your career? Maybe it's at your current job or at a previous job, with actually, I would say managing a team that doesn't report to you or getting stuff on the docket for
Yeah.
them. Like, how do you kind of reconcile with all that, being like on the business side and telling people what needs to be done, identifying the problem, but then maybe not necessarily being responsible for them actually delivering on it.
Yeah, that I would say that's a challenge we all face is like how do you get your stuff to top of the list essentially. I mean, I would say, I mean, some of that is trying to identify like who's really sponsoring. It's kind of like the decision maker, right? Who's the decision makers and is it top of list for them? So that's why I talk about kind of like we just talked about in terms of like trying to understand like the value proposition, because I've seen, and I've done this before in my past, where you do this bottom up thing where you kind of talk to your peers and say, "Hey guys, like, wouldn't it be great if we can change this process around, or like, if it's on the data warehouse and you can change this table or change this field, that would help out." But really, without kind of a business sponsor or any like kind of advocating for this, it kind of falls on deaf ears. Like, yeah, but we got this other stuff we're working on. So to me, it's really trying to advocate and getting like sponsorship. If you can get C-level executive sponsorship, that's great. In our company, like we have a lot of things that are like corporate initiatives. So those are like communicated at high level that these are the most important like projects for the business, for the company. So I think part of that is kind of making sure that we have some type of someone in a senior leadership type of role that can advocate and say, yeah, this is a very important initiative. It kind of goes back to business value around, hey, like this is going to save the company or help the company with X dollar signs. And we have that in our back pocket to justify and say why we need to do this versus saying like, it's more of a nice have. Like, wouldn't it be great if we do this? Like, yeah, that'd be great, but we're already busy. But they're busy because someone gave them that list of priorities or told them that these are their priorities. So I think it's kind of you kind of have to go up in the organization to get around, like trying, or it also depends on relationships, right? I mean, if I have good relationships with certain teams, that can help. If I don't have relationships, then I need someone who can advocate for me because I can't do it by myself. Like it's a more full contact sport in these different things, which can be tricky, right? Because I've seen like myself, I've seen kind of getting funding and approval for projects, but sometimes these things take months because also most companies work in fiscal years, right? So if you don't
Right.
have that listed in your budget ahead of time, you're gonna have to wait until they do the planning for the next fiscal year. So it also depends on the timing because if you show up at the last month of the fiscal year, like, yeah, like we're already our plate is full. We can't take on more stuff. So the timing part is also part of that, just because you can't just show up and say we're going to work on this. Like, nope, we already planned out for the year. Like, talk to me next year.
Yep. No, absolutely. And I think, with budget, like, right now, everyone's kind of on a freeze to some extent, right? Maybe not a formal freeze, but some companies are cutting back. Some companies are, have put hiring on hold, or they've, fired their consultants or, taken various austerity measures. Like, how do you think about when you've scoped a project, it's been approved. Like, how do you think about hiring consultants or outside people to come in, focus on the thing, fix it, get it to where it needs to go, and paying a premium for that versus keeping it in house and having people already on staff deal with it? Like, how do you balance that, or how do you think about that, and how should other leaders be thinking about when to take it external and have someone come in versus you clean up your own mess in house?
It's a good question.
I would say part of that, it really depends on the capabilities of your team and time, right? So, I mean, the previous company I was working on scoping out like a huge like data warehouse modernization cloud migration thing. I had the team in place where I knew that we could eventually figure it out and implement it. But because we already had so much work, it would have took us probably like 5 or 6 years to do that, just because we had so much going on, right? So like it's kind of like the consultants can kind of help like pour gasoline on it, where I know that if we brought them in, we could get that done in like I think it was like 18-month roadmap to get that done versus the 3 to 5 years if my team did it by themselves. So I think part of the kind of the external staff aug really depends on the timing. Like if you have something where like you got to get this done quickly and your team is already booked, then that's when you bring in external resources to help with that. The trick is always, though, that consultant's not going to be around forever. So what's the plan to kind of do the cross training, kind of reduce them and increase your team while those people are there? Because I've seen a lot of the challenges I've faced at different companies I've been at is that they hire the consultants deliver something, and they all went away. And then all of a sudden your team's left with this thing where like, I don't know how this thing works. I don't have any documentation. I wasn't part of this project. And you're like, what do we do with this? So that's the part of it, is like, it's good. Like the consultants are good, but I think having standards and patterns around, okay, this is how we want you guys to design this. This is how you should do this. But making sure that you don't just do like a one-day KT session and they just like go and run away. So it's just I think for the leader perspective is really just being careful around thinking about the long game of like, okay, when this project is over, who's going to own this? Like, who in your team is going to own this? Who's been trained on this? Like, did they know how this worked in and out? Because like I said, consultants are great and they can do amazing things, but I would say playing the long game is what we struggle with, because like I said, they take off. I mean, I've seen this a lot with implementing ERP systems where the integrators are around, all of a sudden they leave, and all of a sudden the company's left with this massive ERP system where like, we don't, like, you guys need to come back because we can't maintain this thing.
Yeah. Well, a lot of consulting firms, you hit the budget and then you want us to stay around a little longer and train you. That's new SOW. So,
yep.
I know the game.
Or like, I usually say like, before you even start the project, like it's hard to say, because sometimes I think saying no is hard, or like, even though you really want to do something, you have to be honest. They say like, we're not staffed to deliver this. Like, even if we brought a consultant in, unless we have budget to keep them around until we bring on headcount or convert to headcount, like we're not prepared to take on this project, which is very hard because, we like to work on new projects and do stuff, but you also have to be fair to your team organization to say that we're not equipped to take this on. If we do this, it's going to be great for the first month, but we can't support this and it's going to fall apart. We got to bring them right back.
Some of those handoff questions and documentation, that whether it's an external or internal team, those are valid. Like I've come in, especially with projects like data management, data governance, which aren't always top priority. You come in and you find like a bit of something that was done 3 years ago by one team over in Confluence, and a bit of something here, and like just a total, even internally, lack of documentation. So
right.
Yeah.
And architecture, right? I mean, I think the, you can go the route of bringing in consultants, but then you need to make sure that there's a architect, someone who's trying to keep these things together. Because I've also seen the spaghetti frameworks where you brought in 5 consultants, you have 5 different ways of doing things. So I mean, I think having strong architecture, standards, and patterns in place to say, if you can bring in the consultant, that's great, but here's how you're going to design this. Here's how this should look, so that it should be like, no one should know that a consultant built it versus like an internal person. It should be that seamless, but easier said than done. You really don't realize until after the fact.
I do think with so much of the documentation challenges, whether it's with code or other technical documentation, I do think that ChatGPT is going to solve it for us pretty quickly. Fingers crossed. We'll see.
ChatGPT will solve everything. Well, yes. that kind of brings up another point. I'm curious. Working for larger business, like a lot of our listeners, I think trend towards mid-market to smaller size companies, lean a little bit towards the tech world as well. Work for software company type of lean. So I'm curious, like how much of the buzzword bingo of data stuff has come up at Carhartt or at your last job? How much of that is making its way there? Things like data mesh or analytics engineering or various other buzzwords that come out. And how do you think about that in your role? Because I think where a lot of that stuff develops generally does not necessarily have data governance as a defined role. It might be there as a concept or a piece of somebody's job, but it's not always there just because of the company sizes and maturity levels. So I'm curious about like, you know, what are the buzzwords going on in your world, and how do you kind of manage that or look into it or think about it?
The Carhartt and data, everyone's talking about the Tech Bros show, but what else?
Yeah, I would say, data is huge right now. I think, luckily I don't hear too many buzzwords. I think, there's always questions like, okay, what's this chat GBT thing? Are we doing anything with it? Usually it's like hey, are we doing anything with that? And it's usually like yeah, so-and-so maybe playing around with it, but there's no like projects or there's nothing like a big initiative around that. So I think there's always people who kind of talk about, like when Microsoft Copilot was released, there was a little bit of chatter, even their own team around like, okay, what is this? What could we do with that? So kind of like the art of the possible. Like, yeah, we could do that. Luckily, I mean, I've heard of some people where the companies where the CEO come down and say, hey, like we need to do something with this. But luckily, we don't get hit with too much buzzwords where it's like, okay, the so and so at the high level said go do this, and then we have to rush and go put this together. So I think a lot of it's more organic, where it's like more like people kind of try things out, test things out, and kind of see what it's made of versus kind of being pressed on that. I mean, I know that there are some bigger things like Lake House, and it's kind of an architecture that we've at my previous company we looked at on that. There's some teams in Carhartt looking at some Lake House stuff, but we also have to we're pretty careful too, just because we have day jobs and we're already working on things. So trying to take on these newer, like, flavor of the week things is tricky just because like, I can tinker around with it, but like, it's not going to gain much ground unless I can put resources and a project against that, or else it's just something I tinker with and show people and then say, that's cute, but where is the thing I asked you to do that you're supposed to be working on?
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, right, you're, and you're running an SAP shop, it sounds like. So yeah, no, super interesting. What about like on-prem versus cloud and how that relates to governance? I mean, and master data management is, I'm guessing that you've worked, around, initiatives to get stuff off of on-prem systems onto cloud, whether that's, cloud storage, cloud data warehouse, et cetera. How does that kind of work with your world with getting things scoped in? Like, are you scoping in MDM and governance into those projects, or does everything get migrated over and then you kind of have to run around and then say, all right, everybody, like we didn't consider the governance. And here's what's wrong. Now we're going to retroactively do it. Are projects different? Where something that's on-prem might be different than how a cloud project goes. Like, how does that kind of all work?
Yeah, so we are looking at, some cloud capabilities. I would say the big thing about the cloud, from my perspective, is just the maintenance of it, right? So on-prem, you have servers, you have to worry about patching, you have to worry about like software, you have to worry about keeping like, releases and testing. So I think cloud a lot, because also like in the governance master data, you don't have like, you have people that are technical, but you don't have like a ultra technical team. So I think understanding just skill sets and capabilities has to be managed, because like, do I want my team worried about like updating and patching like our MDM or product software? Probably not, right? So we have been looking at just some SaaS product master data offerings, just because it allows us to push a lot of that work up into the vendor, so that we can more focus on like, the data integrity, data quality, all those things, and not worrying about like kind of back end, like, servers going down and patching and rebooting and kind of monthly Azure testing and things like that. So definitely looking at cloud just as a way to bring more efficiencies and kind of push the stuff that we're not great at back to the vendor and say, you guys focus on that. We'll focus on like the tool itself and just the speed, right? The time to value is even better, just because they're going to keep the software and things up to date. So we know that we don't have to, because I mean, in the previous company, we wanted to kind of update SQL Server, but we have to wait until December just to do that because it was a quiet time in the year, no one's around, and it took us like a month just to patch and test SQL Server. So I think in the modern kind of the cloud systems, it just allows us more time to do the stuff we want to do versus kind of just maintaining our environments, which is it's has you have greater control. But I think in modern times, like, do I really need to manage all this stuff myself? Probably don't need to do that.
Right. Are you are you mostly on-prem at Carhartt right now?
So I would say I'm only there for 9 months, right? So I think most of our stuff has been moved up into Azure, into the cloud. So I mean, it's still VMs and IaaS in the cloud, but I think for the most part, the majority of our applications are up into Azure, which also was the last company I was at too. We went through a pretty huge Azure migration where we pushed most of our environments up into Azure. So it seems to be like that's becoming the norm, where kind of having the on-prem data centers is changing, and most people are moving their stuff into cloud. Not to say that they're optimized for the cloud and they're kind of managing using PaaS or SaaS, but still, most places I've been at have been really doing a huge push to push things up into Azure. Yeah,
absolutely. And anyone in our audience, feel free to ask questions. Of course, we always open it up here, towards the second half of the show. So feel free to ask any burning questions about data governance.
Yeah. There have been questions. I've had some connectivity issues that have stopped stuff from coming through. So if someone could share Lauren, if you could share the YouTube link just in case LinkedIn isn't streaming properly, that would be awesome. I'm going to Slack it to you right now. Apologies for the technical issues, folks. I know lots of people said hi, but yeah. So we may not have people joining us live with their questions today, but it's all good. Let's get to the bigger question. That's one of those questions that doesn't really have an answer, but since you're like a not BS type person, you will have a good answer for it. Like, what does it mean to be a data leader? Again, like in the whole data content marketing creation mill, we have a lot of people saying a lot of nonsense. A lot of the people who talk about data leadership are the people who don't actually know a whole lot or haven't maybe necessarily led much of anything in data. So just from your roles and from the way that you do things, what does it mean to say, like, I'm a data leader?
Wow, that's a thought-provoking question, right? Because you can go many different ways. I mean, I would say earlier in my career, I've kind of had developer roles, did architecture roles, so I jumped into data leadership. So I would say early in my career, I was much more of the player coach, where like I enjoyed kind of coding, and did a lot of report development, a lot of SQL query writing. So I was kind of in that, like, the leader who's the player coach, where I was doing a lot of hands-on stuff. And by the way, I had a team that I can kind of give work to. So I did a lot of that. But then you realize that the business is going to have a lot of needs, and kind of needs you to move more into the actual leadership part of it. So I think that's a challenge I think a lot of us have, is a lot of, I would say, data leaders are really just kind of like engineers who have people that report to them. So I would say, what I've been working on lately is just really trying to split out the more strategic side of it. Because I know I hit a kind of stalling point in my career where I was told that, I need to be more strategic, and to grow my career, I need to get more into strategy. But I really didn't know like what that was. I mean, I was very good at like giving people data, telling people where data was, but trying to connect like why people wanted that, how does this provide value to the business, that was very lacking. And trying to like drive the data program forward at the some previous companies I've been at. So I think the challenge of a data leader is that it's very much still like tied to IT, but there's such a change management and like strategy portion of it that I think a lot of folks are lacking, just because either they don't. I think a lot of people are, like I said, they were like, they're former data engineers who are in these roles, but maybe they haven't been told or they're interested. But like, that's really part of it, is really trying to say data has strategic values, not just a cost center. Like, it can really drive the company forward. But the role of the data leader is to kind of connect and tell the business, like, hey, here's all the different ways in which you can leverage data to like improve revenue, reduce costs, reduce risk. Like, that's really the part of the data leader is really trying to be that advisor and evangelist to say, okay, here's how data can benefit the company, and I can show you how, and then putting that strategy together. And then there's like the execution side. So this is how we're going to deliver that.
There's so much like wisdom in what you said, that maybe being a data leader is being a data strategy leader. It has to have the word or the strategic aspect in there. And then I appreciate your honesty too, saying that it was really when you needed to maybe push your career ahead that you learned that. Again, we talk about this a lot on the show about how data people don't necessarily by nature have that business, except for Lauren, have that business hustle or business sense. But you've got to get it to drive your own career ahead and to make yourself and what you're doing really worthwhile to the business.
You have to, or else you just seen as like kind of a back office, like order taker. I think that's also the big change, is that earlier in my career, I always thought that like the business was going to give me priorities, or the business was going to give me the right requirements. But you realize pretty quickly, like they also don't know, or they're going to advocate for their stuff. But they're not going to, because I don't know, for where you bring like 6 people in the business together from different departments and say, hey guys, can you help me prioritize this? And they all look at you like, no. They'll tell you what's on the list, but they're not going to do that. So then I know, okay, well then that's my role then to kind of take all these projects and say, this is what's more important for these reasons. Like that was a huge shift. And also like the requirements where, we build data products from what the business told us. But you realize that they really didn't know what they were asking for, or like you spent a lot of time working on something that they didn't use. So that's another part of data leadership, is trying to flip that to figure, okay, what exactly, like before my team does anything, like you explain to me what you're going to use this for, why it matters, kind of the so what then what. So if I gave this to you, what would you do with it? If I gave you X, Y, and Z, how would that benefit the business? So I think that's also the part of data leadership that I think is lacking and we need to focus on, is like how to work in tandem with the business and not just kind of take what they say at face value, because they're leaning, like as much as we lean on us, they lean on us to kind of help drive the conversation and tell them, okay, what am I not thinking of and how could I use this? But yeah, that's another part of it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to talk about, because I know you said you gave a few talks recently. Lauren and I are giving our first talk together coming up at Data Day Texas. I don't know what month that is. We don't know yet what we're going to talk about.
There's a lot of people. Yeah, I think that's January, right? There's a lot of people I know going.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll be there. And then obviously the big like Snowflake and Databricks conferences are coming up. And I predict that in-person events like this, except for the very few of them, most of them, I think in 5 years, these are going to start getting phased out. I see the value of in real life gatherings, definitely, but I don't know. I'm not someone who gets a lot out of these types of events. What's either of you, your take on these sort of gatherings? Like, do you go for that?
It depends on like what, what the goal is, right? Like, so, at the end of this month, there's Databricks and Snowflake are having their conferences, and they're obviously overlapping because they're competing with each other. But if you go and they're going to say that 10,000 people showed up, but 10,000 people aren't going to show up. There's going to be like 5,000, and of that 5,000, probably 3,000 of them are going to be, vendors or people who work in somehow work for one of the vendors, and so like right now all these events like this that are centered around a specific technology, I just tend to be vendors talking to other vendors. And the only reason that's happened the last couple of years is because there's so many employees at these companies, like not just Snowflake and Databricks, but all the satellite companies that sit around them. There's so many employees at all these companies that you're just selling to the other employees of other data companies, and it's just not efficient because you're burning like $4 or $5 for every dollar that you bring in doing that. So those types of things, I think, they're always going to be around, and like I don't really think there's a ton of value, to be honest, out of those. What I do think there's tons of value with is, just independent events. I've hosted them before. No agenda, just go in and talk to people and have people show up. And talk about your what you're working on, what your thing is. I think those are going to continue. And I think that right now, like Ethan Aaron, who we've had on the show before, he runs a happy hour in New York. I live in New York. I've been to all of them. I've known Ethan for years, but he's like, yeah, we're just gonna have a happy hour. Everyone pays for their own drinks. People show up. I've met a couple people from there that I wouldn't have met otherwise. It's a good way to get out of this content mill, because everything you see online on LinkedIn and on Twitter and whatever else, like a lot of it's just very manipulated. A lot of it is very, especially with these like cheap products or free products, it's very gamified to get you to like download stuff or get an install number. So then all the venture capitalists can say, oh, look how fast it's growing. And then get another venture capital firm to throw more money into it and play that whole game. So like these in-person events that are like more genuine are really good. And I like that they're continuing to happen more and more. That's my rambling thoughts there with all of this.
Quick plug, I'm hosting one of the events tonight in Ethan's series, his low-key data events. We're doing the first Los Angeles version on the beach. It's not beach weather at all, but we're going to do it. So if anybody's in LA and watching, make sure you sign up to come. And you should host one in Michigan, Aaron.
Yeah, I was going to say that Ryan from the Super Data Bros, Jolly, we've been talking about that in the Detroit area, getting one together. We just got to get schedules coordinated, things like that. Because I would agree. I think I was at a data governance conference last week, and I would say I got more out of just kind of talking with people at the lunch table or after, like between sessions or after hours, seeing people, like, because the challenge of the conference I've seen is that a lot of people who are new in role or like first couple of years attend those to kind of figure out, because sometimes people are new to role and they're like, I don't know what to do. Like, especially in governance, where someone like put me in this data governance role, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So they attend the conference just to get like the high level around, okay, what should I be thinking about? But then past like the first year, like those people don't come anymore. So you see a lot of very much like first timers at those things and kind of very new in role, but you don't see a lot of people who've been in the role for 5 to 10 years showing up to those. I think some of that is just the format, right? Because you show up for 4 days to kind of be talked at for like 30 minutes, 30 minutes a session. And it was interesting, like, so Juan Cicada from Data.World, he had a really good kind of group setting where we talked about generative AI for like 30 minutes. But that was like, it wasn't really like a presentation, just people talking, and like we stopped it. But I told him like we could have went for like 2 or 3 hours. Like that's the type of stuff I think people wanted, just more bouncing ideas and talking like back and forth with each other. So I think that's where you kind of get these kind of happy hour events too, where it just allows for people to discuss and talk about, okay, what are you doing? What are you working on? Like, what are some challenges? So I think the format has to shift to more so like conversational versus just like a traditional presenter presenting ideas and then like, all right, we're done. You're going to the next session.
Yeah, there's
a
shift happening. The successful events will be ones that embrace whatever this new vibe is. That's probably one that can happen again in real life or in some sort of metaverse version. You can tell I have an introvert side that just hates going into this stuff, but I have to pretend like I like it. Yeah, so I'm gearing up.
The best is you go to these events, and I've never understood this, and like, everyone's like scanning the badges. And so, after you scan the badge, like, I don't know, you get a list of whatever, between 100 and 1,000 people or whatever who came by your booth. And then you can go email them stuff or whatever. And I don't understand why these data people are like, just like scanning these badges. Like you could literally just set up a stand outside any of these conferences and just, shake people's hands and talk to them and make it more personable. But like, I see everyone, like, I know a company in the data world that has someone who's like their job at Snowflake in a week or whatever, a week and a half, is going to be just like the badge scanner lady. And she's just going to be scanning the badges. And it's just to make a list. And it's so like inauthentic that I don't know. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's a funny world. And then I think part of my hesitation about them too is it's like ultimately it is still very much these events are very much a man's world. And you know, I had when I was back in the fall, I was at DBT Coalesce, and you know, as a woman in the tech world or in the business world, you know, we often use the expression like, you know, you feel like you're part of or standing on the outside of an old boys club or old man's club or something. And it wasn't that feeling that I got at that conference, which is interesting because it bills itself as this very progressive conference. It felt like the young dudes club, and anyone who wasn't like a young dude is like outside of this impenetrable circle. So I don't know, it was a weird vibe, and you get those at not every conference, but at a lot of conferences.
Yeah, it is a good question though. Like, what is like it kind of goes back to the point of like, what's the purpose of the conferences, and kind of eventually, like in the next, you know, 5 to 10 years, just how do those shift? Just as because also they're expensive, right? It's very expensive to they're thousands of dollars for registration. You have to do the hotel, the flights, and the meals. You have to take off work for a week. So it's a question around, as we see kind of budgets tighten up and kind of people's mindset shifts. Like, is it just more so like, hey, if it's something local, you know, people are ready to. So I think to your point, I think it becomes a lot more localized because those are much more inexpensive, and you kind of can talk to people who actually are nearby you. Because you know, it's great to talk to someone across the country, but it's like I'm only going to see you once every couple of years if we so happen to go at the exact same time. So yeah, it'll be interesting kind of how conferences play out in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Good stuff, guys. Yeah. Sorry we didn't have audience participation this time. Again, I don't know what's going on with my StreamYard LinkedIn connection that's bugging, but it's all good. Anything else? It was great to have you, Aaron. We expect you to send us some Carhartt swag. Wasn't that the deal we made before? I'm kidding. No. But as we tell every guest, when we make Tech Bro Show swag, we will send you some. We just haven't made it yet.
That's awesome. Looking forward
maybe
to
for our 1-year anniversary coming up in January, we'll do that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you guys. Like, I always love these discussions just because it's interesting. I find that it's kind of relatively small community, the data community, but a lot of us face just the same challenge, right? Even, you know, as you guys have asked me questions in the conference, I talk to our folks, even overseas, it's very much a global community, and we face the very same problems, regardless of size of company, big, small. It's kind of like we're reinventing the same problems, and we're all kind of talking about the same thing. So it's interesting, just kind of, you know, that's why I like doing some of these things, just because it's a reminder that like you're not alone. Like, it's not as bad as you think it is at your company, because some people have it way worse. So it's like, you know, we're all in this together, and it's just
well, let's end on that note, because you post every day on LinkedIn. That's again how we found you. What made you do that? Was it part of that sort of like search for other people to chat about this, or was it purely a cheap self-promotional move on your part?
No, it was just a personal development. I like to give myself kind of challenges. So last year I had some goals around like presenting at a conference, and also like being like on a podcast. So I posted, you know, once a month, or maybe once a quarter. I was posting, and I actually like was able to do that, right? So I did some local stuff, and I was on some podcasts. So it kind of shifted to like, you know, if I just started to post every day, what would that look like, right? So like, what would I learn about myself, interacting with people? So it's just more of I wasn't trying to get anything out. It's more of a personal challenge of like, you know, is it even possible to do that? Just like, you know, just post every day and talk about data, like topic strategy, leadership, and execution.
Has it been hard? Because I tell a lot of people to start posting every day, and like maybe 1% of people do it. So
it is difficult. I'm very undisciplined in many cases. So there are some days where it's easy, but there are some days where it's like, there's been 3 or 4 days this year where it's been like, I have nothing to write. Like, I'm completely empty of ideas, and like I have nothing to write about. I eventually did post, but I think if you're disciplined and structured, you just need to kind of get ahead of it. So I have a whole entire Google Docs worth of like topics, but I'm like, I don't feel like writing about any of that stuff. So I always have stuff to talk about, but I find myself kind of just bypassing my own thoughts and like, what can I write about today? So that's the trick, is just kind of getting a system in place so that you're not like at 11 p.m. like, oh crap, I didn't write today. So that's the trick, is just being more structured and organized with it.
Yeah, and you've got a good voice. Like you bring in personal stuff and a mix that makes it, people want to read it. So,
and also try not to be like, part of what I wanted to post too, because I see a lot of people post very like generic things like once a month, and it's like, so I try to add in there, and like I try to get more in the weeds around like, hey, like these are the things I'm working on. This is what I think about. Like, let's talk about stuff that's not the most like generic information that I could have wrote like 5 or 6 years ago. Or to be honest, like, hey, most people aren't like working on like Chat GPT or general AI or LLM. Like, these are the type of stuff that a lot of us are working on day to day. So I try to be more practical with kind of the stuff I'm thinking about, the stuff I'm working on, versus kind of more of a talking head that just says the most generic stuff that can be said.
Yeah. Lauren's dying to say something. Lauren, what are you laughing about over there?
I was just laughing because you can see what different people's strategies are. There's like meme guys. Meme guys are posting memes all the time, and then have their take on the meme. Then there's venture capital Twitter. I go in there and I just fight people constantly. I don't care. I'm gonna keep doing it, and if you don't like it, you can hit block. So whatever. Venture capital Twitter is great because 80% of these people have no idea what they're talking about. They're just like, like if you've ever seen like drag queens, like they call it like voguing, where they just go out there and they pose, and it's like a bunch of venture capital drag queens out there just flashing the hot new thing of the day. It's like, you don't even know what you're talking about. You have no idea. That's funny. And then there's the people who post something, and then if they don't get like 5 likes or whatever within like 5 minutes, they delete it, and then they try it again a little bit later. Like the whole thing's great. I love all of it. It's all
I've heard about that. People who don't get immediate responses, so they just delete it. It's like, well, that kind of defies the point. I mean, the funniest is like, my favorite is like when I'm like, I throw something together, I post it. I'm like, this is like the dumbest. One time I got 100,000 views on something I thought was the dumbest thing ever. I didn't think it was that good. All of a sudden, like, people liked it. So that's the thing too, is like, just I tell people all the time, like, you also kind of lose, like, you become like very self-protective of some of your thoughts, and you think things are dumb. It's like, just post it, because people decide if they think it's interesting or not, or they'll move on. Like, no one's thinking about you, most likely. They're going to read it and say interesting or not, and they'll move on. So it kind of releases that kind of imposter syndrome a lot. Just like, post it, click it, press post, and then move on with your day.
Just throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, and it's usually it's the noodle you
unless you say something about, oh, this company, here's what they're doing wrong, and here's
I lost Lauren. Did you lose Lauren?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna. Oh man, technical issues all over the place today. Well, she might come back in, but I'm going to finish my thought on this actually, and she can start up again in a second. I do some, or I used to do some coaching on getting people to post, and we'll just finish the show without her. And I found, interestingly, that doing what you're doing, the daily posting, again, most people don't do it once they set that challenge. But men have a harder time, not with the discipline, but with the putting themselves out there. I think as women, maybe we're like used to the world being hard, so it's like, just put yourself out there. Whereas with men, it's a bigger mental block.
You're in your head. You're thinking too much. Look, I have so many people that give me such positive, like, I love what you're putting out there. People I work with say, I love it. I look forward to it. Like, you get so much positivity, but I would say, like, there's such a mental block around, like, just being self-conscious around, like, okay, this seems dumb. Yeah. I don't seem professional. Like, you just get into your feelings, and it's like, never mind. It's dumb.
Yeah, no, it's tricky. It's tricky, but it's that feedback is awesome to hear. Even if it's like, whether it's teaching somebody something or giving them someone else less of a sense of isolation in their day to work and all that, it's powerful stuff. So it's not just about collecting followers and likes and all that. So we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Aaron. Sorry for Lauren's sudden departure. We won't take it personally.
She was bored.
Yes, and we will talk soon. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it, Mary, for having me on.
Thank you, viewers. Bye.